Time's gone by. Last week we had a whole bunch of new music we never heard from the Longest Johns, a Welsh and Scots group. And this time we're hearing from ones some of you are too old to remember, or way too old to remember, or too young. Rick and Judy are too young to remember this group. You may have heard of Andy Williams. You may have heard of Bobby Farron, may have heard of Dale Rogers and Roy Rogers and Dale. What's Dale's last name?
Evans.
Dale Evans. All right. So we're going on a different trip today. A couple of things to remind everybody. If you go to the All Souls WhatsApp, or if you're not on WhatsApp, go to WhatsApp and become a part of what's going on at All Souls. Sometimes people are not able to get in, and I simply do not have the ability to look at my phone, and do this and look at. I can't do all of that. But Grimmy does check the WhatsApp to see if anybody's having trouble. So if I would strongly suggest if you get into WhatsApp, add All Souls Miami. If you're having problems getting into us, then he can check it out and help you out. Okay, Anaki is having a very rough time. He had a bladder surgery, and it has gone. Oh, Nick, yeah, here's Nick. Just put the thing up. Nick is our wizard in charge of WhatsApp. Yes, we do have wizards here. He's in charge of the WhatsApp, and he is very, very helpful with that. So between Nick and Digit, you'll have a lot of help here. Anaki's had some serious problems post-surgery with bladder surgery, and it is a tough recovery right now. So I ask you to keep him in your thoughts. It has been a very, very rough time. He has a group that he posts with on Facebook, just through the group. If any of you are interested, let me know. Email me or text me, and I'll tell you what the name of the group is, and I'll tell you how to get on it. But he's having a rough time. Next Sunday, to help you out for next Sunday. Now, I'm going to get in trouble already. I know this for next Sunday. Let me ask you a question. That song, Away in a Manger, have any of you ever really been around cows in a barn?
Yes.
Yes, it's not what the song says. If you've never read about cows in a barn, you're in for a big shock. Number two, guess what has only been around for 63 years? This may come as a big shock to everybody because our memories in the United States of historical things are challenging. What's been only around for 63 years? Pampers. Yes. Those of you that have had babies before Pampers know what I'm talking about. I'll stop right there. Okay, moving right along. Christmas Eve will be at Arelli's, both in person and on Zoom. We'll be doing lessons and carols. And let me also remind all of you that are here, our giving at All Souls is tight. We have a lot of people who are part of All Souls family who are just making it month by month. A lot of people. Right now, we have only 17 people who give regularly every month. That's not to lay a guilt trip on anybody, but if you haven't given anything this year to All Souls, please remember us if you are able. We will have gone through 30 services this year by the end of the year, 30 services, 50 book clubs, 28 connections. And I don't know if many of you are aware of how much pastoral care I do. This week, I'm supposed to have off. I have pastoral care home visitations all over the county, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday.
Merry Christmas.
Supposed to be my week off. Most of you.
Merry Christmas, Ken.
Yes, Merry Christmas. Most of you probably don't know that I also do pastoral care on Zoom, text messaging, a lot of text messaging, and I think a lot of you would be surprised of how many phone calls I make. So I'm just sharing with you that a lot more goes on here, and I think people just tend to forget. So if you have forgotten by mistake, or if you have a chance, I know with the election, a lot of people were preoccupied with giving there, but if you could remember us, remember we live on a tight budget. We have no endowment. We have no money except what's given. That's it. And we have no people who have lots of money that I can tap into. Some idiot said at a UUA meeting, well, every church has a person you can obviously tap into because they've got money. I said, I don't know what churches you belong to, but we certainly don't have any. So just remember us if you could. So we're off to a wild start this Sunday. Larry has brought out some interesting music and ideas. And let's remember by lighting the memorial candle once again. Something that is horrific has brought to our mind. I don't think any of us were aware that roughly 500,000 people, most of whom were innocent people, died under Assad's leadership and his father in Syria. Over 500,000 died. And when the prison gates were opened, 100,000 people are unaccounted for. 100,000 people, because they disagreed with something, they argued about something, and they have not been heard from again. This is probably only replicated more than in the country of the Congo, where there has been a series of civil wars for the last 14 years. And over 11 million people have died in the Congo, most of whom are innocent non-combatants. So it is an unpleasant planet. And every time we turn around, innocence. So we must keep the candle alive for innocence to remind us that people through no fault of their own are no longer with us. Let's hold them and their memories close. Constant reminders to try to find peace. Here we are, everybody, for all those whom we don't know, who have passed in terror, confinement, prison. Remember Syria, and remember the Congo too. Our introit. Yes, this is an interesting introit. Andy Williams. We welcome this morning, before we begin, Nikki Landquist and Gail and Tom Besaw. And let me say before we begin, it was Gail and Tom especially, who introduced me to Cindy and Larry Deitch. So if you've fallen in love with these two as much as I have, we need to thank Gail and Tom Besaw from Port Orange, who effected that introduction. And we are eternally grateful. As I said to Larry the other day, I felt I've known him all of my life, and maybe in a way we have. Our call to worship, I ask you to respond in the green. Are we ready? Your terrible job is the dream of the unemployed. Your house is the dream of the homeless. Your smile is the dream of the depressed. Your health is the dream of the ill. Don't let difficult times make you forget your blessings. And a morning prayer written in the 700s. For those of you who would, we read it together. Eternal light, shine into our hearts. Eternal goodness, deliver us from evil. Eternal love, be our support. Eternal wisdom, scatter our ignorance. Eternal mercy, have mercy on us, that with heart and mind and soul and strength, we may seek and find your divine presence. We were acquainted with this last week. It comes again. And I am embarrassed that I had to learn this from Andrea and from Larry as well. I'll ask all of us to read it together because it is that good if we could read it together. I have one life and one chance
Chance
to make it count for
something.
something. My faith demands
that
that I do whatever I can, wherever I can,
when-
whenever I can, for as long as I can, with whatever I have, to try to make a difference. And a reading from the Gospel of Matthew. It is a modern translation from the Sermon on the Mount. Happy are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Happy are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Happy are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. And happy are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God.
Say, kids, what time is it? Now, if you answered or you thought it's howdy doody time, I know how old you are, and you can't hide from the truth. No, it's time for Slap Happy Holidays. Happiness is different things for different people. My late mother-in-law, Lucille, used to tell Cindy when she was growing up, you make your own happiness. And that is a witticism and a truth that should carry all of us all the time. You make your own happiness. But there are things, there are people that I like to refer to as happiness suckers. In literary terms, you might think of Ebenezer Scrooge and bah, humbug. Happiness suckers are the kind of person that would come up to a 70-year-old man, 79-year-old man, me, getting over the effects of Guillain-Barré syndrome, has arthritis in every joint in his body and macular degeneration, and after a conversation says, well, at least you have your health. What? It's the kind of person who walks into a funeral home at a memorial service and the family is gathered around the casket and they're standing there and everything, and the person looks down in the casket and turns to the family and says, Aunt Mildred never looked better. What? Yes, she did. She was alive. She looked a heck of a lot better. Return with me now to those thrilling days of yesteryear. And it was time for the annual trip to Grandma's house, over the river and through the woods. No, not by a horse-driven sleigh, but instead by a Renault French-made car. And you load the family into that little tin can on a roller skate. And you go off to Grandma's house. And as you're driving to Grandma's house, the kids don't want to go if it's Christmas, because they've just gotten a bunch of gifts and goodies and toys and they want to stay home and play with them. But no, you put them in the car and off you go. And your young daughter has had about enough of it, and she decides that the best thing she can do with the new Barbie doll she got is to smack her brother in the face with it as hard as she can and give him a bloody nose and a black eye. Oh, happy holidays. And we drive all the way down and we go all the way down the road. And finally we get to Grandma's house. You pull in the driveway and you open the breezeway door. And then you open the door to the kitchen and you walk in and you are surrounded by this wafting smell of turkey and ham and all the fixings cooking and smelling, and they smell wonderful. And this joy and happiness comes over you, if from nothing else, from the sense of your belly. And you greet grandma and grandpa, and it's wonderful to see them again, and hugs and kisses all around. And you leave the kitchen and you go into the living room. I know everybody calls it a great room now, but it used to be called the living room. And you go into the living room, and there are brothers and sisters-in-laws and aunts and uncles and kids all over the place. And the joy and the laughter, it is invigorating. And the happiness just swells up inside of you. And your young niece, Sarah, comes over to you, and she climbs up on your lap, and she tells you these tall tales. Okay, they were lies, of course, but wonderful lies. And at the end of that time, she looks up at me and she says, Uncle Larry, when I grow up, I'm going to marry you. And I said, well, Sarah, what about Cindy? She said, well, she can live there too if she has to. And then my daughter, who was the only one who seemed to be able to get him to do this, she would get grandpa to get out his guitar and a harmonica. And yes, he could play both at the same time and sing in between. And we would have this wonderful concert. Not very many holiday, Christmassy, or Thanksgiving type songs, but songs like Out Behind the Barn. I always tried to get him to sing Cigarettes and Whiskey and Wild, Wild Women, but he said, no, 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 this is not that kind of crowd. And we're singing and we're laughing, and everyone's singing along on some of the things. And it is happiness personified. And then you hear the car crunching through the snow coming into the driveway. And it's just before the meal time. And that greasewood door opens again, and then the kitchen door opens, and in she walks. The hated sister-in-law. And when she comes in, there are cursory greetings to grandma and grandpa. And she comes in and looks around the room that was just a few minutes ago so full of joy and laughter and song. And it is suddenly quiet. It becomes like a tomb in that room. And it is an amazing phenomenon. So amazing that my son said one year, you know, Dad, next year we ought to all get T-shirts made from one of those T-shirts companies and get her picture on the T-shirt, and then put that circle around it with the slash across the circle, you know, that international signal of banning something, stopping something, and say, ban Aunt Sue Ann. And just about that time to the rescue, grandma comes out of the kitchen and says, it's time to eat. And we go and we sit around the table, and the small talk and the chewing and the gnashing and the overstuffing of our appetites. And it's still very quiet. And it's not very happy, really. And the meal ends, and without fail, every year, as soon as the meal ends, that aunt stands up and she says, well, we have to go now because I have to go home and grade papers, or some other lie. And you hear that kitchen door close, and very slowly it begins to build. And then you hear the car pulling out of the driveway. And within minutes, everyone is laughing and they're joyous again. Do you know a happiness sucker? Are you a happiness sucker? You know, the carpenter from Nazareth went around his world, his area. And what he did more than anything else was he spread happiness. Just think about it for a moment. Can you imagine being one of the 10 lepers who were healed? Can you imagine how Jairus and his family felt about a daughter they thought was dead was now outside playing in the yard? Can you think how that despised, tainted woman at the well felt when Jesus gave her happiness? Or how about that hated tiny little tax collector hiding up in a tree? Nobody liked him. And Jesus gave him happiness. Happiness suckers are all around. You don't believe me? Talk to a clergy person. Seriously, if I lined up today 100 clergy right here in this room, well, they wouldn't fit in this room, but the egos alone would not fit in this room. but can you imagine if you lined up 100 clergy type people and you said, do you know any happiness suckers in the churches you serve? If they serve more than one church, I guarantee you they have a Mount Rushmore of happiness suckers in the church and communities of faith. You don't believe me? I don't like the budget. Why in the world do we pay that minister so much money? And who ever heard of playing an organist or a choir director? And you know, the kids want to do something and they expect me to pay for that. And of course, the most famous of all, you know, it's time to paint the church sanctuary. And I want it to be the color of my living room in my house, purple. Happiness is different things for different people. What do I do to make other people happy? What do you do? Ask ourselves that question today. What is it that I do to make someone happy? Maybe I can't heal a blind man, but maybe I can make a meal for him. What do I do to spread happiness? Are you a happiness sucker? Or are you a happiness spreader? You know, my prayer, my sincere hope, my deepest desire for myself, for you, for all of us, that in this time of chaos and hatred and anger and frustration, that we all find some way, some path, some happy trail to follow. Amen.
Just this past week, we were looking at Faces of Jesus as our last class in world religion. And one of the things I reminded people is our image of what happened at the Last Supper is totally based upon a medieval concept. We think of Leonardo da Vinci's everybody sitting at a table. And looking at Oh Happy Day, I don't know if you're aware of this. In Jesus' time, people did not sit at tables. The table was about 2 feet off the floor, and it was long and wide, and you reclined around the table. You sat on the floor around the table, and you put your hand up, and it was long and wide. They're not sure whether it was the Last Supper, and by the way, nobody knew it was the Last Supper if it was, and we're not sure if it was a Passover meal, because if it had been a Passover meal, guess what? It would have not been a serious occasion. Women, children, boys, girls, are you ready for this? Cats and dogs. Everybody comes to a Passover meal. Everybody.
Cows.
Everybody comes to a Passover meal. And the cows. Yes, he mentioned the cows. Remember the cows next week. So we come to do a Jesus meal. We had a choice when we began at All Souls to do this very, very strictly with incense. Nobody was interested in that, and very, 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 only a few. Or we can make it what the early church did in the beginning, is make it a meal where people brought things, they gathered, they shared, they talked, and it became a joyous event, and people were welcome. There was no thou shalt not come. So at All Souls, we offer a meal every time we gather, even if it has to be online. Simple bread, a simple cup, and a very, very simple plate. And offer this as a meal of welcome and companionship and affirmation. You're not only welcomed at All Souls, you are affirmed as well. And this does not always work for everybody from different traditions. So imagine us now, after having partaken of a meal, gathering together and all holding hands. And this is what we used to do when we met at the Jewish Community Center. We would all hold hands, regardless of gender, regardless of preferences of love, regardless of where we are, who we are, what we're from, just gathered together and held hands. And then we went to our famous in-house resident theologian, Winnie the Pooh, and asking you to read after me, if you would, these words as we gathered from all sorts and conditions. Promise me you'll remember. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, smarter than you think. God didn't promise days without pain, laughter without sorrows, sun without rain. But the divine did promise strength for the day, comfort for the tears, and light for the way. And our concluding prayer, written by Andrea, for those of us who wish to read together. In the beauty and the stillness of this Advent day, which we all keep in our own way, may peace be in your heart, joy in your movements, faith in your breathing, and hope in your presence. Let us all be a wordless prayer of joyful dance and song, hailing the future, hailing creation. Selah. We close with a benediction that is a typical All Souls concoction of Irish and Hindu. Now may the road rise to meet you, and may the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. May the rains fall softly upon your fields. And when we meet again, May the divine in me great and embrace the divine in you. Go in peace. Amen. Well, thank you all very much for being with us this morning. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I have a story about Larry. You're going to have to hear about this for a moment. Larry filled in at Riverside, a disciples church up in Jacksonville. He was asked by the resident, quote unquote, in the free church tradition, you don't have bishops, but you do. You just call them a different name. So he was asked to fill in for, he said, how long? He said, well, a little while. It turns out it was a year. This is not what Larry had in mind. He was retired, thank you very much. This was a few years back. So he finishes out a year there, and on the way home to Port Orange, he says, I will never have to preach again. Unbeknownst to him, then a couple of years later, Tom and Gail, who knew me from years before, and Tom says, hey, would you like to get to meet Larry Deitch? And Larry and I are talking. It turns out we could be twins. And I said, oh, by the way, do you ever happen to do shares? He says, what do you mean? And the rest is history. So whatever you share with us, Larry, it is a delight. And thank you, Tom and Gail, for bringing that to us. That was a couple of years ago, and thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you to Cindy, who gets the material, and then Larry, off you go. Good morning, Rick and Judy, Felix, Danny Sorkin, and Maureen, and Gail, and Tom, and Digit, and Pat Sullivan, and Serge, and Bobby Vance, and Pat, and Nikki Lindquist, and Nick, and Barbara Young. Good morning to you. Thank you for being with us. Happy days, if you can. We needed the antidote. We needed the antidote. And I hope I will see some of you on the 22nd. Remember, on Christmas Eve at 6:30, for those of you who are local. If not, we will be here. We're doing lessons and carols on Zoom. Be safe and well, and bless you all. Bye-bye. And again, thank you, Larry. Thank you.
Be well, everyone.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you, Larry.
And thank you, Dr. Penn.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
And-
Bye-bye
and-
now.
Yeah.